I only have 25 minutes to go through the last 20 years of my life. It's always a little disappointing. If I really had my way, I'd just do 8 hours of improvisational arrogance for you, but we're going to try and keep this tight. So I want to focus on one thing that Peter actually said that we didn't get into in the moment, and that was his big fear is technological unemployment. And it's actually something that it seems like it shouldn't be a big deal, because there is a massive agreement about what you do about this. There have been policy reports on the future of work from the UN, the White House, the UK government, the Bank of England just had a report out, McKinsey and Accenture have had reports, the G20. Every major organization in the world has a report about the future of work. And one of the most common themes is what we need to do is reskill. And in some ways, one of the simplest ideas there, that again, if you read through all of these, you'll see, is teach everyone how to program. That this is how you are prophylactic against this oncoming age of AI-driven technological obsolescence. Well, it's all bullshit. Yes, one stupid, crazy lady is disagreeing with all of these important people and their extremely well thought out and well-intended advice about how you deal with the future of work, how you deal with change, the uncertainty of what's coming. But I will state again, unequivocally, despite the arrogance of it, it's all bullshit. And the reason I say that is because I have the coolest job in the world. I am a professional mad scientist. I started my life as a theoretical neuroscientist at UC Berkeley and Stanford, and then I started a bunch of companies, and we worked in these spaces of education. We worked in hiring, one of the first companies ever to use AI in hiring, and I was right there as their chief scientist, looking at what actually made 122 million people great at their job. And nothing in any of those reports is what we found. So a couple years ago, I had this idea. I want to do something different. I love solving problems, and I love people. Possibly because they are so alien to me. I am a decided weirdo, and trying to be a scientist to study all of you is really fascinating to me. But we had this idea of starting a think tank, and we get to go around the world and help solve problems for free. And they're the kind of problems people have given up on. And if you think teaching people how to program will get them a job, let me introduce you to any West Virginia coal miner that ended up thinking, fuck this, 10 years of people promising me job retraining, at least there's a guy here that's promising to get my coal mining job back. I'm going to vote for him because none of it worked. Reskilling is a wonderful idea if we were looking at a future that we actually knew. The one thing we know about the future, particularly 10 years out, is that it's uncertain. And we need to build people for that uncertainty. So this is what I'm going to talk about. There are 100 different things I would love to tell you about because I get to do really fun and cool work that does, I hope, real human good around the world. But we're going to focus on this because in a think tank whose whole purpose is to explore the future of human potential, this is the topic that I think is most relevant to you, for yourselves, your companies, and the policies that get played out in all of our communities around the world. And one of the starting ideas here to share is one that I originally brought up here on whatever the hell it was, Monday with Peter, which is technology is not the problem or the solution. It's just a tool. Doesn't matter whether it's exponential or not. It is just a tool. And one of the things I've really learned, particularly starting as a neuroscientist, we've learned however complex you think the brain is, it's more complex than that. It was just a hard rule that I took away. And then the more I studied, kids in educational contexts, people at work, more and more, it became clear that this was just a profound reality of anything that humans touch, and even beyond. In the end, there are only messy human problems, and they only ever have messy human solutions. If you've got one simple thing that's going to fix your problem, then you don't. You're lying to yourself. These are complex problems, and if you don't understand them, you cannot make a difference. In fact, I hope it's not heresy at this event, you will almost certainly make things worse. At least I think we had one speaker up here 20 minutes ago saying something similar to that. And we really need to take ownership of the fact that innovation for innovation's self doesn't actually solve anything. Understand a problem and make a difference. And I'm not saying this as a Luddite. I've spent my life building very fancy technologies. I'm not going to take the time right now because I don't have it to really go into detail, but if any of you have ever heard me speak before, you know some of these stories. This is a deep neural network that we built before people had that word, and I built it to reunite orphan refugees with extended family members. Technology and AI itself can truly do good and do more than match your product with the right target customer. This is my son here, diagnosed with diabetes 6 years ago. It was one of the worst days of my life, spent at Oakland Children's Hospital across the bay on a cot next to him as they slowly titrated his blood sugar levels down from off the charts to he might survive. He lost 25 pounds off a 40-pound frame in what felt like a week. It was terrifying. But it was a week later when I saw how diabetes was treated. You handwrite numbers on a sheet of paper, and then a doctor squints at it, and they come up with a treatment plan. And I thought, you've got to be fucking kidding me. I make models of the brain. Are you telling me diabetes is more complex than the brain? So I hacked all of his devices. I got to tell that gentleman that I broke several federal laws along the way, and I built one of the first ever AIs to treat diabetes. It's actually rather shocking because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and no one had ever done it before. And it wasn't because I did anything truly innovative. I was just in a position to make a difference because it mattered to me. And my starting point for solving that problem was buy a book on endocrinology. My wife and I did that. We read it front to back. The next day, we started this project. A month later, we had the first version of Jitterbug built and out in the world. It was amazing, and then we gave it away. One of the coolest things, I think it's Eli Lilly, is building a version of these predictive smart pancreas that, at least in simulation, actually works better than the real thing. And to give you a sense of how I think about the world, inevitably, someone in this audience will feel some genuine moral affront that I gave it away. I don't judge you, but someone will come up to me afterwards and say, why didn't you patent it? You could have sold the patent. To which I always respond, during the time it would have taken to put that patent together and then go through the sales process, someone would have died. Would I have been willing to take that money to buy their life? Of course I would have. So there you go. That's how I spent the money. Every moment in my life is spent thinking, how am I serving my purpose? And we might have time at the end to come back to why that is so important to me. But that's how I make decisions. And every day, my life gets better. It's amazing. I keep doing these stupid things and giving things away and saying no to amazing jobs, and my life always gets better. And we're going to talk about that in a moment, but here's one more example. my very first experience ever working with machine learning and artificial intelligence was a project doing real-time lie detection for the CIA. I was an undergrad, and they just gave us a bunch of raw video, no audio, no context. We had to tell whether people were lying or not. 20 years ago, that was a bit of a bridge too far. You're actually seeing one of the PIs running in real time on that. And if you can recognize the video running next to it or the GIF next to it, then, and it's GIF, just give me a break about GIF, then you can appreciate that the outcome of that lab. It spun off as a startup, struggled along for a little while. They had the very clever idea of doing a real-time expression recognition, doing one of the early Republican primary debates, when I think most people were wondering whether Ted Cruz and Donald Trump actually had human emotions. And literally the next day, the bidding war started between Facebook and Apple. If you recognize the GIF, Apple won. So if you really want to understand, I mean, actually, everything I'm going to say about the future of work doesn't matter. This is what's really important. After a whole session here of innovation and exponential technologies, if you can appreciate that tens of millions of dollars of CIA funding, 24 dissertations, 20 years of research distilled down into animating cats on your phone, then you will truly understand the end, all innovation ends up being animated cats on phones. It's just a fundamental reality. It doesn't matter what it was meant to do. And really think hard, if you're investing in blockchain, what this really means. Distributed cats out there, no one's in control. So we, shit, I'm already like 25 minutes late. The moment I walked onto stage, my talk was behind schedule. So, all right, this is morally ambiguous. Like, some of you might come from countries where lie detection for the CIA doesn't sound to you like it's such a wonderful technology. So I took the same technology, and I built a system for Google Glass that reads facial expressions. And so we could look at someone and see the constriction of their orbital muscles and see what's called a Duchenne smile, the real thing, and know it. Well, you and I get that for free. And you can imagine all sorts of things. If I build a set of Google Glass with a bunch of spook-funded technology in it, maybe I'm telling if you're lying, maybe I'm floating your credit scores over your heads, I'm pulling up your Grindr account. If you're a CFO, I'm pulling up your Ashley Madison account. So we did it for autistic children. One of the most common symptoms of autism spectrum disorder is an inability to read facial expressions. So we thought, what if we could make an augmented reality system that would allow them to learn in natural social interactions how to read facial expressions? And one of the coolest things of that project, by the way, there are now commercial versions of this out there. This was several years ago, and which is wonderful. One of the best findings is they learn empathy as well. We didn't actually expect that to happen, but when you think about it, the state of the art even today is a cartoon face on a flashcard. Yeah, they're happy or sad, but not for any reason. It's just the way the world is. Some people are happy, some people are sad. You learn this weird, arbitrary thing about neurotypical people, and then if you're lucky, you can memorize it and you move on. Here it turned out when you actually learned to read facial expressions by interacting with people, and there was a reason they were happy or sad, you learned empathy. It was a truly amazing thing. We've had the chance to work on projects like this, and looking at building AIs to support the Make-A-Wish Foundation is a new project we're launching into to literally improve the survival rates of the kids. Working with suicide hotlines, looking at the economic contributions of refugees in Europe and being able to actually identify the factors that drive success in some countries and some cities and not others. No shaming here. What works so that you can actually, everyone benefits from what is actually a human tragedy. There's so many things that you can take technologies like this and deploy them in the world. And we've had the chance to work on quite a few of them. But there's some interesting facet to this, which is this idea here. In summary, looking at what I've described to you so far, if we had the time to really go at it in detail, but also to think about many things you probably have already thought of. If you really want to understand artificial intelligence, you see all sorts of projects up here. We get to work in neuroprosthetics, jamming things in people's brains to make them smarter. Well, that could be awful, and it really would be if it was uncontrolled. We're looking at kids with traumatic brain injury. Can we actually get them back to the person they were before? Or predicting manic episodes in bipolar sufferers, 25% of whom will otherwise go on to kill themselves. This is worth doing, and this is stuff that technology can genuinely help. But let's abstract away from this the idea of what artificial intelligence is. Any brief expert judgment, faster, cheaper, and better than a human can do it. And we're not there for every expert judgment, clearly. But if you really want to think about this stuff, think about news stories that I'm sure you've already read. I'm just going to cite one. It's one of my favorite go-tos because of the impact. There was a competition at Columbia between a startup that had built AIs to read contracts and a bunch of human lawyers. They produced NDAs with a bunch of engineered loopholes in them, and then they had the two teams go at it and read them up. The AIs found 95% of the loopholes. The humans found 88%. Whatever, they're only human. Let's call it a tie. So the real tale of the tape, particularly if you're one of those Ashley Madison CFOs, is it took the humans 90 minutes to read each contract. It took the AI 22 seconds. Now, a lot of us have been promised that if we went to university, we'd have a good job for the rest of our lives. In fact, that's one of the main policies that a lot of those big policy papers I started this talk off about are encouraging. We need more people to go to university. We need them to learn these future-proof skills. You mean like being a lawyer or being a doctor, when increasingly AIs, particularly in radiology, are able to do diagnostics at least as well as the average doctor? And again, the point isn't that they're better. Run the economic models. The point is, if they're not even as good, but if they can do half of the job for virtually no cost. So you hear this again and again in these big policy papers. Be scared if you're in a physical labor job. If you're working in a field, in a factory, if you're working in a warehouse, be scared. The robots are coming for your jobs. We need to figure out how to take all of these coal miners and train them how to be programmers, because the programmers will be safe and the coal miners won't. Well, here's something you may not appreciate. It is really hard to pick a strawberry. Now, it isn't for us. It's actually trivial for us. But it's backbreaking labor, that's true. But just the picking of a strawberry is not hard. Building a robot that can actually walk through a field, identify strawberries. If you don't know, they typically get hidden by the leaves. Pick them when they're ripe, only at the right amount of ripeness. Don't crush them as you do it. That's really hard. And not only is it hard, but I had to build a robot to do it. And those robots cost money. Let's be blunt. The future is bleak for physical labor. But not because we're going to replace you with a robot. It's because eventually you're going to have to price yourself down to compete. Because there will always be some point at which a human being will be willing to take that job for less than the cost of the robot. There's a lot of work and good things that robots can do in these spaces. By the way, I don't think human beings should be out in a field. I think it would be a human good to end it. But of course, what do you do with all those people? I'm from Salinas, probably the highest productivity agricultural land in the entire world. And a whole army of people that sure as hell didn't look like my family marched out, and still every day march out in those fields. And they shouldn't have to do it. But what will you do with them? And we don't have time to say it, but let me be blunt. Universal basic income is a solution to some other problem, not this one. People have to have purpose in their life. Have to. A job is a pretty shitty purpose, but it's something. Manchester United isn't exactly the greatest purpose, or the Warriors, but it's something. And if people can't build their own purpose, they will buy it from whoever is selling it. That's what I'm afraid of in that group. But with my very few minutes remaining, let's talk about the actual threat. It's the professional middle class. You are the ones I'm after. Jerks like me are building AIs to take your job. Why? Because shock, if you don't appreciate this, your job is so much easier for an AI to do than pick strawberries. Read a spreadsheet, analyze an X-ray, program. Yeah, I can do that. I can build that today. I'm not interested because I like to spend my life doing things that are worthwhile. But it's there. And every major AI startup is looking at disrupting those jobs. The professional middle class is about to get blindsided because we promised them if they went to university and learned a complex cognitive skill, they would have a job. The only thing I need you useless bags of organic material for is to explore the unknown, because that's the one thing I can't build an AI to do. So let's jump ahead with my remaining 3 minutes. I don't care whether anyone knows who this guy is. His name is Rodney Mullen. He's probably the greatest skateboarder of all time. And I gave a TED Talk about him that goes by the very pithy title of The Paradox of Incentive Insensitivity. I mean, it really rolls off the tongue. But to really get right at it, go see the talk if you want to hear the whole thing. But we found this amazing thing. I was the chief scientist at this company using AI to find the best employers. And our goal was to take bias out of hiring, broadly defined. And we looked for the things that were predictive. And here's this quirky thing. Knowing how to program wasn't predictive of whether you were a good programmer. That may sound strange and paradoxical, but it just wasn't. And the best salespeople were the ones that cared the least about the bonuses. We saw this again and again, these weird, quirky things in our data. Everything you're supposed to be. You sell things because people will pay you more. You write code. The ability to write code makes you somehow the creative person that created Silicon Valley, and it's not. What we find instead is the best salespeople, turns out exactly the same as the best software developers, are the ones that do it for themselves. The ones that do it probably even if they had to pay to do it. They're smart enough that they don't, but we've misled ourselves into thinking that we need to control everyone. Ellen's ideas on this last panel are really getting at how do you let people go and be creative. That is the future of work. I have so little time to go into detail, so let me dump 50 different words on you all at once. In doing this research, we do it on little kids, we do it in senior citizens, and we got to do it across this massive data set of millions and millions of people. We looked for the things that were actually predictive. So if it's not your ability to code or the fact that you went to an elite university, what is actually predictive of the best employees? In fact, not just the best employees. Frankly, I don't care. The best life outcomes. Who earns the most money, lives the longest? They're the happiest. They have the highest walking speed at age 65. They're most socially connected than everyone else. It turns out it has nothing to do with the kind of features your recruiters hire for. It has nothing to do with the way we've set up our testing system in our schools or the means by which we pass people into university. It is these sort of qualities. We call them meta-learning, learning how to learn. I told you earlier, what I want from you is a society of explorers. These are the qualities that explorers have. Strong cognitive ability, metacognition, things like executive function and self-regulation, emotional intelligence, social skills, in creativity. There's so many ways you could slice this. We track 50 different constructs in our work, and I don't have the time to describe them all, but let's summarize them. There will only be one job description in the world going forward, and it is satisfying this need that will be the defining characteristic of competition globally. And that is creative, adaptive, problem explorer, not even problem solver. I don't want to tell anyone what problem to solve. I want to tell them why we do what we do. And it is not my job as a leader to say the what and the how. You go find those problems. That's who I need. And I live it in my work, at our think tank, in my lab. I don't care whether you know neuroscience or whether you know how to program or advanced math. As it turns out, I ruined my life, and I spent years homeless. And then I went back, and I taught myself all of this. And from there, went finally to some of those elite, snobby universities and did some pretty amazing things later in my life, none of which was based on living my life right. It was based on not giving a shit what anyone else told me to do. And that is who your employers need to be. So I've got to get off the stage. Otherwise, a little clown's going to come out here with a broom and yank me off. I used this line when I was up here with Peter. Technology must always challenge us. When you turn it off, you need to be better, not just than when you're not using it. You need to be better than where you started. And I will tell you, most of our technologies in this world, and I'm sorry if you're here from Facebook, but sure as hell Facebook, you are not better when you're using it. But a lot of technologies, like mapping systems, I most surely am. But I am not a better person when I turn it off again. There are so many things to be said about this. Let me leave you with this. We're working on a set of new technologies. I'm not here to sell them, so I'm not even going to name them. But we're looking at how do we actually leverage not artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence, the best of what machines can do to help people. We have one version of this we've already built for parents. It's out there for free. They can go out and we learn about their child, and every night we create, do you have 20 minutes to spend with your kids? Here's the best way to do it tonight for your child. We're building a version for work, where we're looking at how do we turn work itself into a growth experience. And we're about to launch it across millions of employees and some of the biggest companies, because we need to take ownership that the jobs we're creating aren't just getting the job done, they are making better people. And finally, one of the toughest things, and as I look out on the audience, maybe not true of this particular age group, but after a talk, people come after me and say, Vivienne, it's wonderful that you found a purpose in your life, but how do I find mine? So we're building a system for young adults, university, early career, high school dropouts. It's actually, in my mind, the same problem. The courage to actually be you. Because as terrifying as it is to think that AIs are going to take all of our jobs, by the way, the answer to the question, AIs will create lots of jobs in the creative industry, we already don't have enough people to fill those roles. What do you think is going to change? If we don't change our education system, we'll have more need, even fewer people, nothing gets satisfied. How do we build a generation of amazing explorers? Well, one of the first starting points is courage. And so we're building a version of these technologies to help young adults actually experience life in a way which builds into them the belief that their hard work will pay off and their courage is the path forward. And I am so far out of time that I'm going to have to really shut up here. But let me beg something of all of you. You're amazing people, or you wouldn't be here. You're leaders. You're building amazing companies and technologies. And it's so easy to get caught up in technology for technology's sake and endless innovation rather than focusing on problems. Because those problems often are not about your life. They're about someone else's. And one of the ways that I love this described, one of the best descriptions of purpose is it's when old men plant trees. It's when you make a sacrifice that you will never, ever reap the benefits of. But because there's something bigger than you, I beg you, go out tonight. Not a year from now, not after you get your funding round, not when your board allocates the money. Go out tonight and make a difference in someone's life. Tonight, please, go plant a tree. Thank you very much.